Evening. Joanne Revicchio here on the Somerville Overcoming Addiction show, and my special guest is Bob McWatters.
Thanks, Joanne. I feel like a regular. I'm on a lot here. I hope you're not getting sick of me coming on.
Oh, no. No, you're one of our favorite.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on all the time.
That's good. I'm very, very happy that you don't mind doing that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes a guest can't make it.
I live right up the street, so.
That's right, so we get you to fill in. And you have a lot to talk about anyway, so that's why
Yes.
I really do enjoy our conversations about drug courts and our feelings on different things, as we were just talking about before the show started. I want to apologize for not starting off with our song, and we had technical difficulty tonight. I don't know if it's the rain, or maybe they're telling me something. I don't know. But anyway, we were talking earlier, like last night, I don't know if it was MSN, whatever.
CBS.
No, it wasn't CBS.
wasn't
This one
CBS.
was about how doctors, nurses, and
Healthcare providers. Yeah.
that they arrested 60 of them.
Oh,
Now, did you see that?
I didn't see that.
And it's because there's been over 3 million prescription written to persons. They're doing it under the table or whatever they're doing. And they actually sent people in as decoys. And
Yeah.
they turn around and were able to confirm that this was happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, like a lot of professions, there are professionals who see it as money. And these doctors, unfortunately, were, instead of treating actual patients with, pain, were trying to make a profit, not realizing they were just treating the addiction and killing people. And that's really horrendous to hear that.
Yeah, that's what was on the news last night.
Yeah.
And then you had said that you had watched something on
Yeah, there was a
CBS.
segment on CBS last week saying in 2017, roughly 40% of prescription medication written by the doctors was being siphoned off or taken away from the patient by healthcare providers, i.e. doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers. And they gave an example where actually they interviewed a doctor who was sober and drug-free. And he said, for example, he would prescribe 30 pills to someone in the hospital after a surgery, over-prescribing and then coming in and taking, let's say, 10 and continuing his addiction and habit. And he did it for about 10 years.
Wow.
So, it's unfortunate, but, it's not just a poor kid in Somerville or Roxbury or Cambridge that's the addict. There are plenty of people, white collar, and
That's right.
our neighbors, our friends, a lot of addicts out there.
Right.
We need, and this problem isn't going away. I mean, you call it a pandemic, I call it an epidemic. This is a real issue. It really is starting to hit Europe and Asia. But in this country, I still can't believe that they haven't sufficiently been able to tackle this. I know it's going to take time, but we are losing more and more Americans every day, and there's really no solution right now. And it's actually disheartening.
It's almost up to 200 a day. That's quite a bit.
That's a lot.
It was, I think, was it last year? It was 129. So since then, it's gone up 70 people.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
It's a scourge, you've lost your son. I lost my cousin recently. It impacts every family in this country, and it's something I think that our elected officials from the national level down to the local level need to get a grip on. We got to do something because our mortality rate has actually decreased because of this epidemic, and if we don't really sufficiently treat this addiction and this scourge, I mean, I don't know how long it's gonna continue, but I mean, I don't see it stopping in the near future.
No, if they don't take it serious, and they don't, I mean, even in the city of Somerville, there's very rarely any meetings on what are we going to do about it. I mean, when Jack was in office, we had one a month, or one every 2 months. So we would at least meet 6 times a year to talk about drug addiction. And that's when Colin Health came into play, and we have the core program out of the police station.
Yep.
You know, they said it would take a while. Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, the new administration, there's very rarely any meetings about addiction.
And unless you really
it's
know
sad.
about it, it's tough. But, you know, and I agree, I think there needs to be a whole team approach from the medical profession, the court system, politicians. I mean, we have the best and the brightest in this country. We have to figure out from all levels of bureaucracy and, you know, the police, the courts, the doctors. Let's figure out a solution. I know they're quick to write medication to help you stay off it and keep the cravings away, but that should be short term. I think the long-term solution is to get people drug and alcohol free, or drug-free, and to have them come back into society, become a productive member of society. There are too many addicts running around the city and in the country, and I think we're just trying to put a blanket on it just to keep them quiet, and then hopefully, you know, not seeing many of them die every day, but they're dying by the hundreds every day. It's not getting any better.
The thing is, they think that, you know, they say, well, the numbers are down. Numbers are down because there's a lot of Narcan being used.
That's right.
And a lot of these people are being saved.
Yes. And some people are Narcan 2 and 3 times a day.
Right, because the hospitals haven't really put in, it really hasn't been discussed as to how long they should hold them in a hospital after being Narcan. And some of them will hold them for 4 hours, some of them will hold them, you know, I think, didn't it go into effect the 72-hour?
Yes.
All right, so at least with 72 hours, it won't happen.
Problem is you have, some people say, well, it's civil liberties, they shouldn't be held at their own will. You know, there are arguments for and against that, but I think the bottom line is you want to save a life here. Every life is precious. You don't want to see someone in a dumpster or a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks with a needle in their arm. Someone doesn't want to die like that, and a parent or a grandparent doesn't want to get a call like that. So we need to do everything we can, and it has to be a real team approach. Again, it has to be politicians, it has to be the courts, the police, the DAs. I mean, I'm definitely not in favor of incarcerating addicts. I mean, that's not the way to go, but we have to provide treatment. It has to be long-term. I'm not talking like detox and like a 2-week inpatient.
No.
Because if you're using a drug for years, 2 weeks is not going to solve your problem. It's going to take a lot longer.
Agreed. You have to have at least a year or 2.
Yes. Yeah, your brain, from the studies I've read, it takes about 2 years for your brain to get back to normal. It doesn't mean you have to be in treatment, like an inpatient treatment for 2 years, but you should be in some form of treatment for at least 2 years. So you get, because a lot of times what happens when a lot of my probationers would get into treatment, after 6 months they were doing well, and all of a sudden they thought they were cured. They get amnesia, and then they think, maybe I can do it once. You can't.
No.
And that's what happens. So you need to stay in treatment. Whatever works for you, just stay in it and work the program. And I think we need to be more vigilant in this country, and I don't think, I mean, there are people out there that are really trying. You're one, and I really commend you for what you do for the city. And there are a lot of other people out there trying and working hard, but there has to be more collaboration. There has to be more of a team effort here. And that starts from politicians and the courts and the police, as I said. Because we're losing valuable resources, not only putting money into to treat people and to keep them alive, but we're losing lives rapidly every day, and that's not good.
So when you first came in, you were talking about injection centers.
Yes.
And what was it you were talking about?
There was a good article today in the Globe about an injection center in Vancouver, British Columbia. And, there was pro and con. And apparently Vancouver has a real heroin and opioid addiction problem in the city. And they have an injection site where roughly 500 people a day come into a site, 500 a day. However, the other, I went back and reread it before I came on the show. In this neighborhood, they estimate there are anywhere between 8,000 and 10,000 heroin and opioid users. So even though it's only a real minute number of people going in, they have 500 people. And the statistics show that it's cut down on overdose deaths about 35%. Now, I don't have any issues with the safe injection sites as long as it's short term, but I don't think it should be used permanently. If someone is an IV user and you want to prevent them from ODing with the fentanyl, I think that's fine. But I think there should be protocols in place where you eventually give them treatment and wean them off to get them help. And again, my fear is like the Suboxone and the other methodologies they use to keep people off drugs, it'll just be another place where they can continue to go, and I don't know if a real effort will be made to get them treatment. I think in the long run, treatment has to be the ultimate. And I don't know if that's part of the goal, but if it isn't, then I wouldn't be such a big fan of that. If it is, then I think in the short term it should be utilized.
You know, when someone asked me when I, actually it was someone that works for State Rep Mike
Conley, yep.
had asked me how I felt about the injection centers. And at that time, I said I didn't want anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they were talking about it at the State House, and that's probably why he wanted me to get involved with it.
your
You know,
input.
that's why I thought about it. I said to myself, would I not want to see my son alive?
Yep.
And maybe if he had gone to a safe injections facility, he could possibly be alive today, you know, or maybe not. You know, it could have been just
Would have been an
vague.
option.
Right, it would have been an option for him. But that was back in 1999.
Yeah, they didn't have them then.
No.
No, I think...
Actually, 1999 is when his addiction started because he had his accident and went to Mass General, but it continued for 10 years.
I think in the short term, I mean, I have to think this through more, but I think initially I wouldn't have a problem with it as long as the individual knew that, look, you can come in, we're going to help you, but eventually we want to wean you off, get you in treatment, and get you drug-free. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but for long term, I don't think it's a solution.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that for the longest time, with addiction and what was happening and how many people were dying, they really didn't know how to deal with it in the beginning.
No.
So, I mean, now they're finding that maybe having, like a lot of the treatment centers will have a gym.
Yep.
Which is a great thing to let off a lot of your hostilities and frustrations. And not only that, but boxing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like I said, in a couple of weeks, I'll have Orlando in to speak about himself and his addiction and what he does. And I think it's great for people to have something, an outlet.
It's the old adage, if your mind's not healthy, your body's unhealthy. So when you're an addict and you have a disease with drugs or alcohol, once you start weaning yourself off, it's all, you know, exercise, proper nutrition, that all works part and parcel. And that, absolutely, because that keeps the body and the mind healthy, so it all works together.
They're using Reiki.
Yes.
They're using yoga.
Yoga. Just walking, joining the gym.
That's right.
Get those endorphins running and
Painting.
painting. Yeah,
That
whatever.
would be me.
Well, there are plenty of artists in Somerville. You'll fit right in.
Yeah, well, I haven't drawn in so long.
Uh-huh.
I probably wouldn't be able to do it anymore, but maybe. Never say never, I guess.
That's right.
You know, I should just continue. I'm going to retire next year. Maybe I will.
Welcome to my world. It's fun.
Yeah, and then I'll be looking for a job after that. Well, you're working again.
I'm working part-time with the Somerville Housing Authority.
Yeah,
Working with the seniors.
that ought to be nice.
Yeah, it can be challenging at times because they're actually suffering the same ills that everyone else does. You know, some are addicted, some have the mental health issues, and they're not exempt from all the issues we all have in society.
We talked about that on
Yeah.
one of the shows, that people don't even realize how many elderly are addicted as well.
Absolutely.
Because first of all, a lot of times they don't remember if they took their medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who's taking care of them?
Unless their family's paying attention, no one.
Right.
unfortunately.
Then unfortunately, that's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why they do get addicted.
And doctors, I think, and I'm not besmirching the medical field, but I think sometimes they'll just say, all right, here you go, here's some more medication, just to keep them peaceful and sedated. And but it's sad because a lot of them are alone and no one's really paying attention. It's like a forgotten segment of our society. The youth and seniors are almost like lumped together. No one really pays attention at both levels. And, we got a vast growing senior population in this country, and we got to pay attention.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I used to, when I was a hairdresser, on my days off, I used to go and visit some of the seniors, and, because they're lonely.
They are lonely. And, it's when we go to some of the buildings, because I'm working in resident services, they like seeing myself, and I work with this woman, Shannon Bennett. They love seeing us come in. They want to talk to us because they're probably not, besides the people in the building, they don't see any other outside people, or they don't get out as much. And when someone else comes in, they're just, they're happy.
I notice a lot of them go shopping, and what they're looking for is just someone to talk to.
Yep.
Or seeing the little children, and they'll go over and talk to the parents with the little kids. And being that I was also an operator for Verizon when I first started, I was a supervisor, and a lot of times the calls would come to me, and they were elderly people looking for their children. And you would call them and say, your mother's looking for you, or your father's looking for you. And they say, well, that's why I have the non-published number. I'm not well, and they call me all the time. And it's not that I don't love them, but, there's a lot going on in my life, too. So.
And when I was an elected official, there were 5 senior buildings in the ward I represented. And I went into them all the time, and it was interesting because they'd always want to engage me and speak to me. And believe it or not, they're well-versed and they understand the issues. They read and they know what's going on. People don't think they know what's going on. They get it, and they do know what's going on.
Well, they have the time.
They have the time, and they read and they understand the issues. And they're educated voters, too. They know what's going on.
Right.
Let me give another shameless plug. I'm on the advisory panel for the Little Sisters of the Poor. And we just had our annual fundraiser last Saturday night at the Armory, and it was terrific. But, I just want to give the Little Sisters a plug because they do a terrific job in the city. They take care of the elderly poor, and if you have no money, they take you in. And I think that's wonderful.
It is. It is. So Gene, isn't he on the same board?
Gene's the chairman, yeah.
Oh, my God, he's everywhere.
Bill Roach, Bill White, myself. Gene's everywhere.
I know. We're going to go have coffee one day because he said to me, now that you're going to be the Lions Club president, we're going to have to go over all the things on how to run a meeting. It's like
Mayor Emeritus, he gets it. He knows. He's done it all. And I want to give him a shout out. He did a terrific job Saturday night. And also Old Magoon Saloon. I give Greg Coughlin credit. He did the dinner for us at no cost. And, a lot of the local establishments, Sally O'Brien's, Bow Street Market, Boston Burger, they all, the Solari, TJ Solari Plumbing, they all contributed, and I think they made upwards over 200,000, so it was a successful night.
wow.
Yeah. It's the 7th one, and each year we've had them, they've been able to raise more and more money, so that's terrific. Sorry to get off on a...
No, that's fine. That's fine. We have a whole hour.
Yeah.
We can talk about a lot of things.
But it was a terrific event, and it's interesting to see how people come together for a great cause, for the little sisters, the nuns who take care of the elderly poor. I'd like to see that same effort be put into people coming together
Right.
to help the young men and women dying in Dunkin' Donuts or behind dumpsters, and the addicts who are really hurting out there. We got to do a better job, and we're not doing it.
No.
Some people are. I'm not going to say no one is, but overall, I think we get a failing grade. There's too many people dying from this addiction.
Because unfortunately, there is stigma attached to it.
Absolutely.
And there still is, no matter how much we try to stop the stigma by telling people, that we have a lot of people who come out and say, I'm not anonymous. They want you to know about them. We have Matt Gannon. Matt Gannon has been clean for 13 years, and he's the CEO for Banyan Treatment Center. He lived he lived at the, what do you call it, the Commons at the grandstand. So we would go once a month, hand-delivered hope. The bunch of us used to go and feed the homeless, give them hope bags. I happened to do it during the winter. We had like 10 feet of snow. So there I am walking with the, I guess I was the oldest person in the group, and we would walk from Government Center all the way down to Boston Medical Center.
That's a haul.
It is, and we would be walking over these big snow mounds to get to them. But there were so many of them out there when they couldn't get into, and it was about 9 o'clock at night because we would go to help those that wouldn't be in for the night in the homeless centers, and give them shoes, sweatshirts, hats, gloves, whatever we could do for them. Gift cards to go to McDonald's to get something to eat. But that was really a tough winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Matt would be there with me. And like I said, he would always bring extra socks because he knew being out there what
They
he
need
would
socks, yeah. That's the number one thing the homeless need is socks.
Right.
But, growing up in the city poor, and I had a fairly successful career, it just breaks my heart to see that people are homeless. Now, a lot of it's due to mental health and addiction, but for the wealth we have in this country for homeless people and veterans is unacceptable. We shouldn't have one person in this country who should be homeless.
Absolutely.
There's another, and a lot of the homeless, because I worked in the homeless court with Judge Schrago in Cambridge, mental health issues, but a lot of the clients were self-medicating instead of taking medication, so they were taking drugs and drinking. Most of them doing drugs because they knew they had an underlying mental health issue and they didn't want to deal with it.
Right.
So that kind of exacerbates and makes the issue wrong, and they don't understand because of their mental health that it's not normal to live on the street and be subject to, it's actually dangerous living on the street. You're subject to more especially for women.
Oh, definitely.
You're subject to more violence and, domestic abuse and all kinds of a myriad of issues. And we see it too. Some of the women kind of hook up with other men who are homeless for protection, not knowing that they're abusers and beat them up and, take advantage of them. And it's sad.
It is sad.
Sad.
My sister-in-law, Bev, I didn't know her when I first got married. She was paranoid schizophrenic.
Yeah.
It was like she was going through college and she got a B, and seems like at that point is when it kicked in. And one time, she was actually a bag lady out in the streets, and my father-in-law had asked me to pick her up. And I did go out and find her and bring her home, which was the craziest thing for me to do, because at that point, I was her target.
Yeah.
She would call to me in different situations, and no one knew what was going on because they wouldn't see it. And eventually she went to live with my in-laws, but she really she didn't want to help.
No.
They don't want to take their medication, so
Absolutely
then that's
not.
when they're at their worst.
I know many people will tell me, Bob, I didn't want to take my medicine. It makes me feel terrible. But on the other end, the crazy behavior, which is related to the mental health, and that it ends up homelessness and ends up addiction. And that's the other thing I want to dovetail into. I think in this country we're going down a slippery slope decriminalizing drugs. Marijuana is one of them. Statistics now show, and I know I get a lot of grief from this, but teenagers who start smoking marijuana at a younger age, who have a history in their family of mental health issues, are going to have a higher predisposition to have a psychosis or schizophrenia. So my next question will be, well, then why would we decriminalize marijuana when we already have an addiction problem in this country with opioids and heroin? Now I see Colorado is going to try to decriminalize mushrooms. They call them magic mushrooms, which is really mind-altering, and it's I think it's a real dangerous drug to decriminalize. When you alter your mind, you're subject to all kinds of health issues, one being against psychosis and mental health issues. So, you know, in this country, there's so much benefit. We have so many doctors and so many providers, but the problem is people want to take a drug or a pill to feel better, not realizing there are other methods like exercise, Reiki, yoga. But when you start decriminalizing drugs, a lot of people are going to self-medicate. And I think in the long, you're not going to see it now. You're going to have to probably wait another 10 years. But you're going to see some astonishing things that I think are going to be good. Especially mind-altering drugs. That is not good.
No, it isn't.
Because once the brain chemistry changes and the drugs change your brain chemistry, you're not getting that back. Especially a mind-altering drug. And I mean, I'm not a doctor and I don't know the exact epidemiology, but I know once you start losing your brain cells and they start diminishing, it's hard to get back to that. You know, once your mental acuity in your brain goes, you know, you're almost becoming a vegetative state, and you're almost
angry.
Like a zombie. You're angry.
Violent.
Yes.
You know, that's what I'd be more worried about than someone drooling.
Yes.
You know, you could be walking down the street and be someone's target, and they don't even know what they're doing.
No, I know. Look, and I told you before the show, I like potato chips, and I know they're unhealthy, right? There are a lot of things we put on our board that are unhealthy. But drugs, in my opinion, just exacerbate and make the problems even worse. I mean, I don't want someone out there driving on mushrooms or, I mean, the police now are going to have
We've already seen the problem.
with the marijuana now. It's going to be another major issue.
Yeah, well, let's face it. A couple of years back, I was watching the news, and it's like a car went into a gas station, and the two people, the driver and as well as the passenger, must have been driving and overdosed. You don't tell me that that's not happening.
It is.
You know,
And I'm not, look, and I'm not saying alcohol doesn't cause the same problem. It's just as bad, if not,
Right.
you know. And I still stand by it. I'd always say, and I'd get ridiculed and laughed at, alcohol and marijuana, in my estimation, were a gateway drug, and I just felt that this was an avenue for young people to get started, and then to start experimenting with other harder drugs. And next thing you know, they're taking the pills and shooting the heroin. Doesn't mean everyone, and that's not going to happen. But why give someone that opportunity, a chance?
Do you think that maybe the people that were laughing at you don't know? Like you being a probation officer for 34 years and being in the recovery courts, and that you actually do know what you're talking about, you know, and they're
Well, I had the
not
experience. I saw it.
experience and education, and they don't have any. It's just thought.
Well, the one thing I would say is, like people would say, well, I'm not going to go out and commit armed robbery or put a needle in my arm. I said, no, you're not. But there is someone else who may end up doing that. In fact, you should come to court for a week and see the families in the front row crying when their daughter or son's in custody and they're dope sick. We got to send them for initial treatment, and then they're being charged with crimes because they're breaking into houses or whatever they're doing to support their habit. And there's a definite correlation between where you start, i.e. marijuana and alcohol, because it does lead on into other, eventually, for some people, not all people, because we all at some point, every one of us in a little way, in a major way, have addictive behavior.
Right.
And some people just, it's almost like a snowball effect. They get worse and worse, and they need to get a drug that gets them higher or drink more, whatever it is. And to me, it's a real slippery slope.
Yeah. It's totally amazing how, I don't know what's going to happen now. I mean, let's face it, when I was smoking marijuana when I was a lot younger, maybe 20, 21, I didn't smoke marijuana until I was later, and later, later on in life. And the THC level was
Nothing. It's much higher now.
Now it's 26 to 30%.
Yep, much higher.
And that was just a phase for me, and I actually am abstinent to everything. And, I think back, and it's like, even my son Frankie hated needles, right? I can't begin to tell you about the time he put this little BB in his ear, and we ended up having to go to Mass General and had to sedate him so that they could go in and remove this little BB. Instead of him just laying down and letting them do it.
Like a tough guy, he couldn't do it, yeah.
He was about 7 or 8 years old, watching TV, and then
Yep.
I'm telling you, that was very, very, very stressful.
Well,
I wonder.
yeah, but, getting back...
Wait a minute, just let me finish this.
Okay.
So anyway, Frankie ended up being addicted to opioids because of having that motorcycle accident, but someone turned him on to heroin. And
Yep.
he even said to me, Ma, I can't believe that I put a needle through my arm. And then he had a 4 months he had a heroin problem, and then in the end.
It's the merry-go-round. Once they can't get the pills, the heroin's cheaper. But today, unfortunately, it's like Russian roulette because it's all laced with fentanyl.
Right.
And that's how the people are dying, because it's so potent that it shuts their organs down, and that's when they're almost close to death until the Narcan. If they Narcan, they can bring them back and get them out of the high. But for an addict today to be shooting heroin, I mean, it's almost suicidal, but they're so sick they don't care. They need that next fix. But the problem is the heroin isn't like 95% pure anymore. Lucky if there's 5% of heroin, it's all fentanyl now. And that's why they're dying, and it's really...
That's true.
Yep.
I went to this was a couple of years ago. I went to I went down to Foxborough with Matt Gannon. We went there for the opening of a documentary called The American Epidemic. Matt and I were both in that, and they had they had someone there talking about medical examiner as well as the court people. I can't even imagine that. I lost the words. But anyway, it said that 85% of the overdoses in that area were all due to fentanyl.
Yep. Yeah. It's awful.
I couldn't even remember that word.
Fentanyl.
That's okay, yeah.
I don't know if you went to they had the showing of running up in, I didn't go. But I'll tell you, I mean, there's just a little piece of history in Somerville alone, and I watched it, and it was like heart-wrenching because I knew some of those young men.
Definitely.
And I think...
it's just one small part of the city.
One small part, and it was just a little snapshot, but it kind of encapsulated a little, it encapsulated the bigger problem. It was like where it started with, the beginning with, I think it was Matty O'Brien was one of the first to die, because I know they have the plaque up at Kelly Park for him. And the Curtis kid, I know his Uncle Jay, Sean, and his brother's a fireman. He was terrific in that documentary with the Hogan kid. I forget his first name. But that was just I watched that and I was like sad because a lot of those kids I knew growing up. Alex Foster. I know the Fosters, and it was terrible. And I know they have their foundation. They're doing what they can. They're doing their part, and it's just awful when you lose someone. But I think this is what people need to see, what it's doing to our community. Not just only our community, but every community in the country. Right. Everyone's suffering from this. No one's exempt.
So, that I was telling you about the 60 doctors. Well, those 60 doctors were in the Ohio area, and there's an awful lot of overdoses in
Ohio.
And Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee.
Florida?
And no, these were all rural areas.
Rural, yeah. Well, I think West Virginia, I got one of my friends, Zach, grew up in West Virginia. They got a horrendous opioid heroin problem down there, and yeah, they think it's only in the cities. It's just as bad in the rural parts. It's everywhere. It is everywhere in this country, and it's like little cockroaches. They're spreading out everywhere, rats, and it's really hard to eradicate right now. I mean,
well, Marion Ryan has a little map of Massachusetts, and the areas that have a lot of deaths are in the Lowell, Lowell, Lawrence.
It's a lot of the fentanyl's coming through Lawrence. It's just.
It's coming from everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's coming in from China.
Yeah.
And it's,
oh yes.
And it's coming in boxes
Mexico
they're being shipped in, but then, like, it could be a product, but the fentanyl is hidden, and it's getting by a lot of the people that are
big money, unfortunately. But the other side of the argument is, or the other side of the problem is, people are dying every day. Someone's making a profit, but someone's dying.
That's why I could never understand why is the FDA continuing to make more and more pain medication. It's
lobbying efforts in Congress. I mean, I don't know how the whole process works. I wasn't a congressman, but they have strong lobbyists, and they get into Congress, and they allow this stuff to happen. I have no idea why they will allow even more potent drug to get on the market when this drug, the OxyContin, has destroyed a whole generation of our young men and women. I don't understand it.
No, I don't either. It was really amazing. And April 4th and 5th, I took those 2 days off for work. I drove to Marlborough. I got on a bus with at least 20 to 25 other mothers. We went all the way down to Washington, and we actually had a rally out in front of the FDA. And there were people looking out the windows to see what we were doing. And it was really miserable weather. It was raining. And it was actually pretty cold, too.
Like tonight.
Yeah, like today. So what happened was that we have a whole bunch of groups that got together, and they actually paid our transportation.
Nice.
And the Opiate Spoon Project brought their 800-pound spoon and just dropped it right in front of the FDA. We did it all in 1 hour. And they had people just throwing pills, pill bottles, people laying on the ground with tombstones on their bodies, and they had a lot of newspapers there, and actually it was probably on TV for the first time. Like when we went down in 2015, no one even knew we were there for 2 days. And we're walking to the White House, and they do it every year, and not even in Washington, it's not even in the newspapers saying that it took place. Why does drug addiction take, why don't people care about these people that are dying? We worry about the children down on the border. These are all important things. Everybody matters.
Right.
But yet they don't talk about addiction, and when you have
It's
rallies,
like you said, the
they're
stigma.
not huge.
It's the stigma. They figure they're like lower class. They're no good. They're homeless. Who cares? Let them. If they want to kill themselves, let them. But there's someone's sister. There's someone's brother. There's someone who was productive at one time in society, and for us to turn our backs and not even treat them the way they should be, then it's shame on us as a society. It really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My son was someone.
Absolutely.
And he was so creative. He was so caring. And that's probably his problem is that he felt he had his feelings were. He tried to self-medicate because of his strong feelings. And actually, Frankie really liked to drink and not do drugs. He tried everything. Not everything. I'm just saying that you experiment. And he was one of those people that experimented, but in the end, he didn't like anything and would have a beer or a drink. But after the accident, you know, he did ask the nurse, is this addicted? But he never got an answer. And then before you know it, after his injuries, he had to be in bed for 12 weeks. So, of course,
It's when you needed the pain medication.
right, he was in total pain. So this kid would even go out and get loans. He would never steal from anyone. He would rather go to a bank and try to get a loan, and then when he couldn't get any more
Support his
loan,
habits.
he ended up having to switch over to heroin because it was cheap.
That's sad.
But every day, you know, I'm like every mother out there, or any father as well, that would come home every day and didn't know if this was going to be the day that you're going to find your child dead.
Yep.
You know,
My cousin said the same thing. She actually bought a condo for her son. Same thing, like your son started on the pills. But he was getting his, I found out, through a doctor who was kind of underhanded.
wow.
And if you went to him, he just give you the script. Then eventually they stopped, and he was on the heroin, and they found him dead. But my cousin, who's his mother, she bought him a condo and said, look, just stay straight. You don't have to work. I'll take care of the bills. She was trying to help him. But it ended up becoming a drug den, the condo. So she had to basically get him out, throw him out, and then just spiraled even worse. And that's, you know, they found him dead.
Yeah. You really don't know how to deal with it. You know, you just hope that someday that, you know, it'll be over.
Yeah.
Not that they would die, but they would find a way to get help.
She said
that would
that.
work.
She goes, I knew I was going to get a call eventually that he was dead. I just didn't know when. And she said, I just prayed every day that I wouldn't get that call. But she knew it was inevitable.
Right.
And I think a lot of parents out there right now, grandparents, they're living under that fear and anxiety that their grandson or their child
Right.
is actively using, and they know they're going to find them dead.
And there's certain, you get a phone call at 11, 12 o'clock at night. You say, is this the call?
Yep.
You know, no, it really is. It really was tough for me. I know that for over 10 years. I had two,
Mm-hmm.
not just one, two. But, you know, luckily, my youngest is in recovery. But I worried about Frank. And 2 days before he died, he cried and he said, I don't want to die, Ma. And maybe he knew at that point.
Mm.
But, and I end up being the one that found him. But, you know, it's a hard thing to try to overcome.
You never get over it.
No, and that's what a lot of
Pain
people
eventually
say.
diminishes, but you don't get over it.
No. There's a lot of groups that are on Facebook, and one of them is called Team Sharing. And every day, it's a private group. Of course, nobody wants to be a part of that group, but it's a group of people that have lost their children. And every morning there's either an angel anniversary, or it would have been their birthday. And I can't believe, like today they said, welcome to the group. There were 20 people being added. 20 people.
Yep.
There's over, I think right now, in the one group, which is Massachusetts, there's going to be at least 600 members of it. Never mind the other group that's up in New Hampshire, the ones that are forming around the country. We are losing our children and rapidly.
Yep.
And
We're losing a generation.
I think we've already lost that generation.
We have, and you know, and if we haven't, the kids today are running around, not all, but the kids who are suffering, they're running around stoned and out of it, and it's sad. There's a better way in life, but you just got to, you know, there's help out there, but and it's, sometimes it can be difficult. I know as a former probation officer, it's not, sometimes not easy to get help, but there is help out there, and there's always hope to the bitter end. You know, and I would advise any parent or anyone who has a child that is suffering with addiction, try to do whatever you can. You know, don't stigmatize them because they're going to get that anxiety, but do whatever you can. I know I never went through it myself personally. I have a son, but I know what it causes to a family. It's difficult.
Yeah, you've had first-hand experience being.
Firsthand, but don't let them go. Help. Try to do whatever you can. Because if you let them go and throw them out, put them on the street, then you're going to get that phone call some night. And look, I've never been in that position, so I don't want to judge anyone. And I know how, they steal everything in your house and they rob you blind. But they're sick. They need help, and you really got to get them help, unfortunately.
Yeah. You know what? I find that a lot of us are realizing that they need to be loved.
Yep.
They need to be hugged. They need to be told that they are important,
Mm-hmm.
so that they feel that they matter. And a lot of times they don't feel that they're worthy of someone's love because of the position that they're in. A lot of them do want help, but don't know how to ask for it or,
Right.
or how to achieve
Right.
it. Like I said, with psychosis, sometimes, your mind is heavily medicated, so you can't make those judgments or those plans. You just can't do it.
Well, you can't talk to an addict or an alcoholic. You got to try to get them into treatment, and eventually when their brain starts kind of coming back to a place where they begin to act normal again, then you can get through them. But an addict and an alcoholic are very difficult to get through because they're not thinking like you and I. They're not coherent. So they need to get off the drug, get off the alcohol, to let their brain heal and their body heal physically, get back to a shape where at least they can start thinking rationally. And once they're in full-blown addiction or alcoholism, they're not thinking rationally.
Right.
That's the problem. And they think we're sick, not them. They think they're normal, and it's tough.
It certainly is.
But you're right, you need to be compassionate.
Right.
And look, I'm not telling people, you got to do what you have to in families, but sometimes the best thing is not just to throw them out in the cold. And
I could never.
I don't know if I could. I've been never in that position, but I can understand what parents get fed up and they can't. See, you know what it is? None of us have, like raising children. There's no book on how to do it. You just have to do it. Now, add on addiction or alcoholism. Good luck.
Being a grandparent is a whole different kind of
You
animal.
can give them back.
Yeah. No, I love it.
But there's no book on this.
No,
There's
there
no
isn't.
right or wrong. I'm not telling someone you have to do it or you don't. Every situation is unique and different. But I think you're right. You have to be compassionate. Does tough love work? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Depends on the individual. I don't know. There's no right answer to this.
Well, sometimes people are at their
Wits
at
end,
the
yeah.
end of the rope.
Yep.
And
And I understand that. If you're getting robbed blind in your house and you're coming home and you like the spoons, there's no spoons left.
yeah.
You just get.
Or they're stained, or they're bent, or you go for a pen and there's nothing in the pen.
Yeah, and nothing in the pen.
These are things that, wow, there definitely is
Yeah,
a damn problem.
You get to your breaking point. I understand that, but
Now look what we got now, vaping. Now, what are they vaping? Is your child vaping, and what is he vaping? It may not be an e-cigarette. It might just be marijuana.
Well, I'm usually the boogeyman on this show because you know how I feel about all this stuff. I just think any of this stuff is a slippery slope. Believe me, I'm not perfect. I've done a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have. But you got to think about your faculties, your brain. As you get older, if you do these drugs consistently over a period of time, like anything else in your body, it's going to wear out or you won't have it. So,
The body's there, the mind's not.
the mind's not. And once the mind is gone, that's not fun.
No. Well, at least they don't know.
They don't know. But that's the problem, because then it becomes a societal problem when you have, if someone young, if someone started smoking marijuana at 13, psychosis and mental health issues usually manifest between 17 and 21. So if they they have a nervous breakdown or have a schizophrenic, breakdown, whatever they call it, then you see the result of that, the marijuana or whatever drug usually marijuana or mushrooms.
Right.
So, why should we get to that point of our young teenagers being, not able to be a productive member of society if they're mentally ill the rest of their lives? That's not good for us as a society. You know what I'm saying? And we can
Yeah.
prevent that.
I got to tell you something. The high school is being done over, so now I'm the manager of the high school cafeteria, and at 8:30 in the morning, gym happens in the caf, right?
Gym?
So yeah, the gym is in the cafeteria now, so I get to see. And Orlando.
Jumping jacks.
Yeah, Orlando is doing boxing now, so I'm out there exercising with them, right?
Good.
The kids are looking at me. I'm saying, come on. I'm actually doing not just the jump jack, the boxing,
Calisthenics.
and
Yeah.
and they're not even moving and saying, shame on you. It's like I don't say anything to them, but all of a sudden they see this woman that is much, much older than they are, and she's
You're all
doing.
there nimble, running around. And
Yeah. What I would do is like maybe 10 minutes and say, I'll see you in a little while, and I'll go back and do some work, and then finish my exercising with the second class. And then, it's fun because now I feel a big difference.
When you
using
exercise,
those
you
muscles
feel
that
better.
haven't been
You feel
used.
better, yeah. I mean, growing up in Somerville, if you remember the parks, you couldn't get into the basketball court or the baseball field. Now,
always-
I mean, we have limited parks now, but you don't see that participation by the kids anymore. They're not really in. I mean, not all, but there are.
But all those people that were in the parks are actually the people at night at 9, 10 o'clock playing baseball.
Yes.
On the Trump Field.
Yeah.
Because they still keep themselves active. My brother's 70, and he was
Yeah.
up until recently. Well, he's not 70 yet. Sorry, Don. But he would be out there being on 3 or 4 softball
Teams,
teams.
yeah.
He did the Shamrock. All these
Yeah.
different places. He kept himself active.
Yeah, I sort of played hockey a little, but I have most of my teeth, so I wanted to keep them, So you're right. You got to stay active. I mean, I try to walk, 3 or 4 times a week, but you just, since the invention of the smartphones, you don't see these kids out as much anymore. They're on their phones all day.
So now you're getting into a situation where they don't know how to socialize.
Correct. Yeah.
It's
Their
sad.
interpersonal skills are lacking. Not all. I don't want to paint a broad brush, but a lot of them have limited to no interpersonal skills because it's all texting, Instagram, and social media.
Yeah, next week is MCAS up in high school. And finals coming up, and it's good. So my year is almost over, and 1 more to go before I retire. That's a wonderful thing.
Good.
But what I'm looking at is, I noticed that one time I actually took a train. I didn't even know how much it cost. I was just I was amazed that I'm sitting there on the bus. Nobody talks to each other.
Mm-hmm.
All they're doing is being on their telephones. And the same thing as I looked across the track, there were 10 people on the other side, and everybody was on their telephone.
Yeah, and you can go to if you go to a restaurant, you can see people in a bar. They'll be sitting in the bar with their girlfriend. The boyfriend and girlfriend are on the phones. You just don't see
They're
those.
not even talking to each
No,
other.
they're not. They're on their phones instead of talking to each other. And it's like, where have we gone from communication to like a smartphone where you communicate? They may be texting each other, but they're not even talking to each other. I mean, I don't get it. It's a different
Neither do
world.
I. You know what I think? That's a breakdown of relationships right there.
It's a breakdown of something, but I don't know. I haven't really figured out what the long-term ramifications. But I mean, people do get addicted to these phones too.
Definitely. What is it? Cell phone's been out for 40 years. You know that?
No, that's a long time.
40 years. They talked
Yeah,
about
when
it.
they first come out, they were like this big. Remember, they were real
I
big.
had one, not that big, but I had one. My first cell phone I got in 1989.
Wow.
Okay, and I worked for Verizon at the time, and we had, I was in Bowdoin Square in our office. They came in, and we had all signed papers because it was going to be the advertising. And they talked about cell phones at that point, and they said that everyone would have a cell phone.
They were right.
40 years ago, they said this, that we were going to run out of area codes and stuff like that, that we're going to have to make new ones. Before, an area code would be a 0 in the center or a 1.
Yep.
Now, all the area codes are all different numbers.
Yeah.
And we'll eventually run out of them too.
Most homes don't have landlines anymore. They all have, I mean, I get rid of mine because I use my phone all the time.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
And the same, that's what they talked about too, that landlines would be obsolete
dinosaurs, yeah.
eventually. But it is amazing. We only have 5 more minutes to go.
It's
Imagine
always
that.
fun when we come in. There's always a plethora of topics we discuss.
I know.
And next week, we're going to have a real good guest, or you will, Kevin Sheehan. And Kevin was a former colleague. He's currently a probation officer, but you think, I know what I'm talking about. This guy is terrific. He's an expert.
Good.
You're going to have fun.
That's what we need.
Yeah, he is an expert. And
He's been on both sides.
both sides. So he knows. He knows the code.
Can I ask you one question before we
Yes.
go off the air?
Yes.
When someone is in holding,
Yes.
you're not able to help them from the outside? It all has to do with the clinician at that point?
Yep.
Okay. Because I do have a friend that was asking me if there's anything that we could do to get her son into, a sober house. He got kicked out of a facility because somewhere along the line,
On
someone had a
probation?
bill. I'm not quite sure. I think it might be. He might be on probation.
If he's being held on a detainer, it's really up to the probation officer. If he's in holding, they can make that determination. For me, it was easy. I would say you got 2 choices. You're either going to jail or a program. And I'd say, do yourself a favor, go to the program, because I don't really want to recommend jail time. Right. And I think most probation officers don't. You'd rather see someone get help and treated.
Right.
Because if you don't, you incarcerate them, when they get out, they're looking at the same problem again. I mean, there is treatment in jail, but when you're in there, you're getting good time, and it's for they're doing it for like selfish reasons. I don't think all the time, not all, but most of the time they want to get out sooner, so they'll comply with whatever treatment they have. But when they get out, they're going to go right back to it.
Right.
So you're better off putting someone in a program.
There are also problems in jail where people are getting drugs.
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
Some people need money.
Did you see the facility in Worcester where they've already had a couple of overdoses? The DMH facility, they've had overdoses of opioid, heroin, and they're supposed to be treating people. They're lax in their security, and people are just waltzing in with drugs, which is
Right.
awful.
That's sad.
Sad. And there are drugs in jail, too.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Yep,
Drugs in jail.
there are drugs in jail.
Right. Amazing.
They're everywhere.
It is. You know what? We've got 1 minute to go. Anything else that you want to share?
It's a pleasure. I enjoy coming on. I always enjoy our conversations. And continue
It's all over the world, but with
continue your good work, and
I will.
be a strong advocate. We need more advocates like you in the community.
Right. Well, I don't know. I still might go out there and fill out papers to be an alderman at large. But that's
That
been
was
on
my day in
mind.
this. I did that.
Yeah.
It was rewarding. I enjoyed it. But if you do, good luck.
I know. I'll think about it. I still have a couple of weeks, right, to get those.
Yeah, I think until
180.
June 12. No, it's
Yeah.
100. No, for at large,
No,
I think
for
it's
at large,
100.
it's 180.
It's 100. Okay.
So if anybody's interested in signing my papers, let me know. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, YouTube is still on, so I'm going to have